One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to our latest STRAT Talk I5 community. From now on, we will have our STRAT Talks recorded and posted right here to the I5 YouTube channel with questions submitted from you all across the nation on the I5 Slack. My name is Cadet Kylan Smith from the Joseph P. Allen Squadron at Yale AFROTC Detachment 9. And today we are honored to welcome Dr. Jeffrey Hoffman to the series. He is currently serving as the Professor of the Practice of Aerospace Engineering at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And Dr. Hoffman has a robust background in the space industry, including voyaging on 5 space shuttle missions and logging over 1,211 hours in space. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Pleasure.
Of course. So I would like to kick off the discussion with just a little bit about your educational background, maybe the first steps of your career, and then you can continue into how your career has progressed to this point. Just an overview.
Yeah, I've always been interested in space. I'm old enough, so I remember the very first astronauts and Sputnik and all that stuff. I was always fascinated by human space flight, but the early astronauts were all military test pilots, and that was not my career. I was studying astronomy at college and went on to get a doctorate in high-energy astrophysics, thinking that's what my career would be. And it was really when the shuttle came along with a crew of 7 and they only needed 2 pilots, and that really opened things up for scientists, engineers, medical doctors to become astronauts. And I was fortunate enough to have been able to do that. So that completely changed my career. My background as a scientist, although, you know, I fixed the Hubble Space Telescope on one of my missions, and that was certainly for an astronomer a great thrill, and probably I did more for astronomy than if I had remained as a professional astronomer. But I used my general scientific background on many occasions working with scientists who were developing experiments that they wanted to do on the shuttle, and with my understanding of the environment there, I could often help people in seeing things that wouldn't work so well. And so I did a lot of science stuff, but basically shuttle operations, there was a lot more engineering, and now I'm actually in an engineering department.
Fantastic. So it sounds like you've had experience in many different fields. With that, you mentioned you were not a pilot when you became an astronaut, which it seems like there's typically 2 paths. You can either be a scientist or a pilot. So what was your application process like to become an astronaut, given that you didn't go the pilot route?
Well, I applied for the shuttle, and they specifically had applications for pilots and applications for what they called mission specialists, who are non-pilots who would perform all the other duties on the shuttle other than actually flying it. We got to do the fun stuff like spacewalks. I mean, I know that for the pilot, the ultimate goal was to command a shuttle mission and land the shuttle. For me, it was, you know, to get to do spacewalks and carry out experiments and, you know, all the other cool stuff that you do when you go to space as a NASA astronaut anyway. So, you know, everybody got to do their thing. The pilots were happy flying the shuttle, and I was happy putting on a spacesuit and going outside. They wouldn't let the pilots do spacewalks because the important thing was to get the shuttle back home alive, and you know, so they didn't want to risk a pilot, but I was expendable, so I got to do the spacewalks.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir. So it sounds like there might have been some collaboration between military or previous military and you as a civilian. So throughout your career, has that been the case with military and civilian cooperation, or at least governmental organization agencies working together?
Well, yes and no. In astronomy, as an example, the military had developed ways of having, sending a laser through the atmosphere and, being able to eliminate atmospheric distortion. It was classified for a long time. In parallel, astronomers were working out how to do that very same thing. And when the astronomers finally got almost close to figuring it out, then the military said, all right, we'll have a big meeting and we'll all talk about how to do it together. So sometimes, certainly the development of large perfect mirrors like the one was used in the Hubble Space Telescope, that was not done for the first time for Hubble. There were military satellites who also needed, large optically perfect mirrors. They weren't pointed out at space, but nevertheless, the technology was similar. So there have been on numerous occasions, coordination between military technology and what astronomers want to use. Sometimes the astronomers do things totally on their own, but it's been a give and take for sure. And in NASA, of course, the shuttle was designed so that it could carry out specific classified military missions, which I was not associated with. I never flew a classified mission, but I know it was done. They had a classified mission control room, with RF shielding all around it and so on. So yeah, there's definitely been, since the beginning of NASA, there's been cooperation between NASA and the military, because when you're dealing with space, there's a lot of overlapping interests and technologies.
Of course, and I think that trend has really expanded in the past decade, specifically with a lot of civilian groups becoming very prevalent in the space domain. And that actually leads into a question that we've gotten from Cadet Cogdill of Detachment 30. She asks, how do you view the recent developments that have significantly reduced the cost to send people or payloads to orbit, such as SpaceX or other private companies?
I'm very enthusiastic. I mean, when you look at the impact that private space companies have had over the last decade, it's been a tremendous amount of innovation that NASA on its own, I don't think, would have developed. Too much risk involved. SpaceX can afford to blow up rockets left and right, when they're doing their testing. If NASA blows up a rocket, they got to go testify in Congress, and it's just landing rockets vertically has been, and recovering the first stage. I mean, NASA certainly recognized the importance of reusability. That was what the shuttle was all about. But back in the day, we didn't have computing power that would have allowed us to land the first stage of a rocket like they can do nowadays vertically. And so it had to be a winged vehicle that would land on a runway. And, Sierra Space is building their Dream Chaser, and maybe we'll see another winged vehicle one of these days. We've gone back to capsules. But basically, NASA, after considerable initial skepticism whether a private company could really pull this off, to do human spaceflight successfully and safely. But once they demonstrated it, NASA has basically signed on and is certainly taking advantage of the lower cost. Very nice to be able to send our astronauts up in the Dragon capsule, and someday in Boeing's Starship, Starliner, rather than paying the Russians to do it. So, we've gotten a lot out of private space flight. I think the trend is only going to continue and increase, and NASA will more and more become a user. It's the same thing. NASA wants to eventually get out of having to run a space station in low Earth orbit and turn that over to private companies. And there's 3 consortiums now talking about building private space stations. So we're on the way.
That's fantastic. Thank you, sir. I think that industry is growing significantly, and I'm looking forward to seeing that in the near future. Slightly different topic. I watched your TED Talk, Living Off the Land on Mars, in which you showcased a time-lapse overview of planet Earth from the viewpoint of the space station, or on the space shuttle. So if you could
Well,
talk.
the lapse was actually taken from the space station.
Yes, sorry. Thank you for that correction. But if you could talk a little bit more about the beauty or novelty of seeing that perspective, at least from being in space, comparing your first journey to perhaps your subsequent missions, if your thoughts changed from mission 1 to mission 5.
Well, they did. Of course, whenever you see something for the first time in a new perspective, there's something special about that because it's something you've never seen before. And that was certainly the case with my going into space. I mean, you can look at pictures of something over and over again. I mean, you've seen pictures of the Grand Canyon, I'm sure, but seeing a picture and actually being down at the Colorado River, looking up, seeing the rock extend a mile above you with hundreds of millions of years of geological history, it just hits you in an emotional sense the way a picture doesn't do. That's the way it was going into space. I mean, I'll never forget that first feeling looking out the window at the curvature of the Earth and seeing the African continent drifting over the horizon, and you can never recapture the first experience that you had with something. But on the other hand, as you look over and over, your experience deepens. You see things that you don't see the first time, more detail, and I mean, sometimes that was a pleasant experience because you see details and beauties of things that you missed the first time around. On the other hand, over the course of my 5 flights, I saw the continued deforestation of the Amazon jungle, and it would get worse each time I would go up and look down. That's not such a nice thing to see. So there's great beauties of our planet below us, but there's also now visible from a cosmic perspective the impact that humans have had on our planet, which we're trying to figure out still how to deal with.
Of course, that's definitely a topic we should consider, both in the military aspect and in civilian career fields as we move forward. If you could offer one piece of advice for prospective college students or that want to be astronauts, would there be any specific areas of study that are prevalent to current space missions or future missions that we should focus on? And this is a question from Cadet Holscher of Detachment 825.
Sure, and as you can imagine, I get asked that a lot of times, what should I do I want to be an astronaut? I mean, the most important thing, certainly talking about being a NASA astronaut, is to understand the level of competition. And I've been on astronaut selection committees. There are so many qualified candidates that it's very frustrating. I mean, there's many qualified people who we could not accept as astronauts just because there's such a limited number. And so the first piece of advice is that your plan to become an astronaut is your plan B, okay? And you better have a good plan A, just because of the statistics. No matter how good you are, it's still, the odds are against you. Keep it as a dream, put in your applications, do your best, and some lucky people are going to get selected. But you want to have a good plan A because, frankly, that's what NASA is going to be looking at when they evaluate astronaut applicants is, they're going to look for excellence in everything that you do, including whatever your profession is at that time, whether you're in the military, whether you're an engineer or a scientist. So you better enjoy your plan A, because that's what you're going to be spending your time doing, and you got to do a good job if you want any chance of being an astronaut. So you know, keep following the space program, that's for sure, because things are changing, and there are things that astronauts have to do now that we didn't do on the shuttle, and that when we start going back to the moon, there will be new requirements and so on. But for someone to say, gee, we're going to go to the moon, they're going to need geologists. So, wow, I'm really interested in physics, but maybe I should major in geology in college. That's not the way you want to be thinking. If you want to be a geologist, great, go for it. It's a fascinating field. So is physics. Do the one that you're going to be happy with, because that's probably what you're going to be doing in your life. And if you're lucky enough to get accepted as an astronaut, great, go for it.
Awesome. Thank you. It's great that you mentioned that because excellence in all we do is one of the core values of the Air Force. So we have many Air Force cadets as well as Navy midshipmen, but that's something we do try to focus on throughout our college training careers and in our service in the Air Force. So
certainly the watchword, if you're going to go into space, you better do it right, because you only get one shot at it if you have a problem.
Yes, for sure. If you have any last things to share, you're welcome. Parting words of
Well, I
advice.
mean, I know how many young, talented people we have training in the military. I appreciate your service. Wish you good luck. And I hope that you do get to exercise your plan B someday. And I'll keep my eyes out for Kylan Smith, astronaut. That'd be great. And to any of the other people who listen to the recording, as I say, it's a great goal to have. It's very motivational. There are going to be more and more opportunities for people to go into space, not necessarily even as NASA astronauts. So, good luck to all of you. It's a great dream to have, and I hope that some of you can make that dream come true. So good luck.
Sorry. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your advice with our community and starting off the new edition of the STRAT Talk series so wonderfully. So thank you for your words, sir.
Pleasure talking with you. Good luck again to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.